Hey, everybody. My name's Scott Fincher. I'm the data science community manager here at Knime. Happy to welcome you today to our webinar on how to teach yourself data science from scratch. I want to introduce our guest, Hans Samson. Hans, some of you, if you're on the Knime forum, may have run into him already. He's a senior marketing data analyst at ANWB. He's a longtime Knimer, has a lot of experience to share with us today. There's Hans. So, maybe you can tell us just briefly a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, for having me. Indeed, my name is Hans Samson. I work as a senior marketing analyst for the analytics and insights team at the ANWB in the Netherlands. And the ANWB is the biggest club in the Netherlands. We have over 5 million members. Not only have we have a lot of members, but we also have a huge product portfolio. We have a travel brand. We are running 70 shops doing insurance, private lease, but we're most famous for our roadside assistance, the Wegenwacht. And you know what the best part is? All those activity generates a lot of valuable data, and that's a great starting point for doing data science and analytics. I'm
Yes.
curious, creative, and also in my spare time, I like to do some data science projects, but also helping people on the forum, exploring new techniques or applying cool techniques on new data sets. So my life is a little bit around data and analytics.
Yeah, sounds like you have no shortage of data to work with at
No,
ANWB.
no,
Well, cool.
definitely not though.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today. We'll bring Hans back a little bit later. He and I'll have a conversation together, and then he's going to present to you a project that he's been working on about football analytics to kind of show you how he's progressed through his own data science journey. But before we get into that, I know that there are a lot of folks on the call here who may not really know anything about Nime. Maybe you've heard of us, you've heard of the analytics platform and what we do, but I did want to cover a little bit about the software itself since we'll be discussing it in more detail. So we'll talk about low code as a gateway to learning data science. That'll be our starting point. Then Hans will come back on and he and I will have a little bit of a conversation about his journey. Where did he start with data science? What are some of the things he's picked up along the way? And how can that be useful to you if you find yourself in the same position that he did many years ago? And then, as I mentioned, Hans is going to present to us a little bit on his project, his football analytics prediction project, which is just a nice practical application of Nime. And then, again, we'll save some time at the end for a few questions in Q&A. So that's where we're going today. Happy to have you with us. So I'll start in my intro here why low code is a good gateway for learning about data science. Uh, we're big fans of low code at Nine. That's kind of what we do. So it enables a broader range of users to access analytics. So, instead of folks that are maybe, hardcore coders, maybe they come from the Python world or the R world, this lets us get some of those business analyst folks who maybe have been doing regressions in Excel or something. Maybe that's you get involved with analytics. The low code approach is a nice way to dip your toes into the water. It helps because it's user friendly. It's largely intuitive, especially the graphical interface that I'll show you. You're just dragging and drop to build your workflows. As an analyst, you already know what it is about your data that's important. So a lot of times the stumbling block is, how do I get from point A to point B and onward? Having an intuitive tool can help you do that more quickly. Um, Codeless, again, it's drag and drop. So the time to actually get to a solution we find is often a lot quicker. And then, of course, we say this as Nime. The cherry on top is when the low code tool is also free of charge. So the Nime Analytics platform is free, open source. You can go download it. You can even do it during this talk. If you go to Nime.com and click the big yellow button, you can download the analytics platform and try it out on your own. But I'll encourage you to do that. Maybe at the end of the talk, we'll show you some other resources that are available to you, not only the analytics platform to get you started, but some course material and some other things. So we'll talk about that. So I want to talk specifically about Nime here for a second. If you've never seen it before, we'll see it a little bit more as we go through the presentation today. But there in the middle, you see a bunch of colored boxes. We call those nodes. Each one of those nodes performs an individual task. So it might be reading in a CSV file, as you see on the left-hand side in that orange node. You've got some yellow manipulation nodes in the middle to do things like aggregations or filtering or changing type, all sorts of things you might need to do to manipulate or cleanse your data. And then we've a bunch of other nodes as well for things like visualization, training different types of models using various algorithms. And you even see a component on the right hand side. Components are actually a collection of nodes. So it's kind of analogous if you come from a code background to writing your own function or writing a library. On the left-hand side of the screen is the node repository. That's where all the different nodes live. So we drag and drop the different nodes that we need onto the canvas and connect them together to build what we call a workflow. And one of the nice things about Knime is along the way, when you execute these nodes, meaning you run them one by one, once you've executed them, you can actually see the status or the state of the data here at the bottom of the screen, which will give you an indication of exactly what you've done at every step of the way. So it makes it digestible and easy to go back and change things if you need to. So the UI we feel like is really intuitive. One of the things that we've done for beginners who may be new to Knime or a tool like it, we've integrated something called the starter perspective. So uh, Knime has a lot of nodes. In fact, many thousands of nodes that are available, which can be a little bit intimidating if you're just starting out. You might not know what nodes you need to use or even what they're called. So we've implemented something called the starter perspective, which is basically a filtered list of the most commonly used nodes. So by default, when you open up Knime Analytics Platform for the first time, you can just see what you need to get started. And then as your experience grows and you start maybe exploring other approaches, maybe new algorithms you haven't tried before or new ways of treating your data, those nodes are there. They're just under the hood a little bit, and you can get to them, but you're not presented with a series of overwhelming choices right away. You're presented with what you need to get the job done. We also have in recent versions of the analytics platform built in some AI capabilities, again, to help you get where you're going as quickly as possible. So there's a couple of modes in what we call Kai, the Knime assistant, Knime AI assistant, I should say. There's the Q&A mode, which is basically a chatbot. You could ask Kai, hey, what do I need to do to build a classification model, right? How do I partition and then build out that model? And then it will actually tell you in plain text, okay, here's the nodes you need, drag and drop these in, connect them in this way. And you can't see it on the screen here, but it'll actually provide the nodes that you need to drag and drop them just like you could from the node repository. So the chatbot is there. You can always ask it questions if you get stuck. And maybe even more interestingly is the build mode that's associated with Kai, where if you again ask it a question, it will attempt not to just describe to you what you should do, but it can also actually build out simple workflows for you, and then you could execute them and see if Kai got it right. So maybe you ask it a question about how do I uh, build a scatter plot with these two different variables that are in my data set and color it in a certain way. Kai can actually do that for you and build out that workflow. So again, more tools to help you get started, so it's not so intimidating. Uh, those initial steps in your journey. So we have a lot of different access to resources to get you started if you're thinking, "Ah, I might like to try Night Out." Um, First of all, we have a really large community, over 300,000 people who are active Knime users who are out there. You may know somebody at your company that's already using Knime, or someone that one of your buddies, on LinkedIn or something. The community is large, and often you'll find very willing to help, as we'll talk about the forum here in a little bit. We also offer several different online self-paced courses. Online courses taught by our data science team on the from our evangelism side, but then also self-paced courses. If you don't have time to sit down at the same hour every day, you need a little more flexibility. You can go onto our learning portal and watch the videos and work through the exercises. Both of the online and self-paced courses will help you get to NIME certification. We offer several different levels of courses and different levels of certification. So that more of the more kind of structured classroom type approach is something that we offer. We also have a whole bunch of different books, cheat sheets, and sample workflows to get you started. So we have books that are like textbooks that come with sample workflows. We have other books that can help you transition from other tools. For example, we have books about transitioning from Excel to Knime or transitioning from Alteryx to Knime, that will just kind of help you understand, okay, I understand what this is in Excel. What's a VLOOKUP in Excel called in Knime? That'll help you, right? Um, And then sample workflows to get you started. We have something called Community Hub that I'll tell you here in a minute, which consists of not only pre-built workflows and data sets that accompany them, but also nodes themselves, extensions, and components that you can drag and drop into your Knime Analytics platform. Basically, taking advantage of what the community has already done, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just look it up on the Community Hub and use that to get started. So that's that pre-built functionality kind of that I'm mentioning to jumpstart the learning. And then we also have a whole bunch of different user groups and data connect events that we run all over the world, where Nimers can show up and exchange their experience with one another. Sometimes we have learnathons or hackathons where we sit down together and actually build workflows around a particular project. So if you're interested in that, you can find that on our events page. I did want to mention specifically the community hub. If you go to hub.nime.com, you will see this page, a big search bar so that you can search for different use cases you might be looking for a workflow to get started on, particular nodes, particular extensions. You'll see a list of collections that we have available that you can click on if you've never seen Nine before and you want to understand how to get started. There's a starter collection. If you're interested in building, really beautiful interactive reports, there's a collection about our Nime reporting extension. Similarly, for the generative AI capabilities of Nime, there's a collection. We have several different collections around things like that, right? Um, that make it intuitive to find the things you need. So don't be intimidated by looking at that blank canvas and thinking, okay, I've read in an Excel file. What do I do now? Take advantage of the community hub to get you access to the things you need right away, so that you can get started quicker. Okay. So the 4 steps I would encourage you for learning data science with Knime. First of all, download Knime, big yellow button on the main Knime homepage. Then explore our course offerings and see which tracks might be relevant for you. We have different tracks for different roles: data scientists, business analysts, engineers, that you can look at. And then start trying it out, right? Look at the community hub to find some templates for use cases that interest you. And then once you've actually started playing around, I would encourage you to join us in our community on the Nime forum so that you can interact with other Nime users, get help on your workflows. Maybe once you level up a little bit, you can turn around and offer help uh, likewise to people who may need it. So very quickly, that's how I would suggest starting moving up that learning curve. But maybe it's more interesting now to hear from Hans, because Hans has actually been through this process himself. And he's been doing this type of work for a long time. So I wanted to take a few minutes here just to talk to Hans, and get his perspective on things. So welcome back, Hans. Thanks again for
Yeah,
joining us today. Maybe we could start at the very beginning. How is it that you started working with data, maybe before data science was even a term that anybody actually used?
yeah, exactly. I already started working with data before data science was invented as a profession. You can say that the common thread in my career is data and analytics. I started as a market researcher, then switched it in the early days of the internet to ANWB.nl department, um, creating web pages using SPSS from an Excel file, doing all kind of weird stuff with that. Did some database marketing, moved more and more to the analytics part. I was one of the first members of the ANWB data science team, and I'm now leading the analytics and insights team. So, yeah, in my whole profession at ANWB, there has always been a connection with data and analytics. And not only
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
my, and not only in my professional life or privately, I like to play around with data yeah to do cool stuff, making visualizations, gaining insights from data sets, and do some predictive modeling, try new things, all that kind of stuff. I'm just a curious person.
Sure. So you mentioned starting with SPSS. So that was a tool that you used early on in your journey.
Yeah.
So at what point, how did you come into contact with Knime? What did that look like?
Well, there was one day that my SPSS crack license, it was an illegal one, stopped working. So I had to find out an alternative for that. So I think it was maybe around 2012, 2014, I think, that period that I was looking to other tooling as well. Looked a little bit in Python and R. Also, um, was thinking about a rapid miner, but well, Knime suits me best. It was intuitive. Yeah, to me, that's the, yeah, the nicest tool to work with.
Yeah, I that's a common experience I think that people have had where they're using another tool and all of a sudden, it stops working for whatever reason. It's not supported anymore, or maybe their boss comes in and just says, "We're not going to pay for this anymore," and there becomes
Yeah,
a need, right? We've got to shift gears a little bit here. Um,
yeah.
well, let me ask you this then: when you mentioned working with the marketing data early on, and probably you
Mm,
weren't doing what we would call data science at that point, or at least the more sophisticated aspects. Probably you were cleaning the data and treating it and so forth. But
yeah.
at what point, did you start really moving up the data science learning curve and saying, okay, this is something I'm going to do, and how did you approach that?
Yeah, well, I think that has a little bit to do with the introduction of Knime at ANWB. Was in 2017. There we were building a model factory that was creating prediction models for our marketing propositions. And that is when I really got into data science, do the predictive modeling, learning all kinds of new stuff about algorithms, etc. That was yeah, mainly the main kickoff for learning really data science. And then I took it also into my personal, my own projects like my football prediction model.
Sure. So I know there's a story here about you coming to Nime Summit and seeing
Yeah,
the word cloud that Michael was presented, that was a bit of a motivation for you, um,
yeah,
to start expanding your Nime knowledge.
yeah, exactly. And it was, I think, in 2019 at the summit in Berlin. I think it was Rosaria who presented a word cloud of all the participants on the Nine forum. And the bigger your contribution on the Nine forum was, the bigger your name was on the word cloud. And because there was one person, Scott F, with a big F on the end, and that took a little bit too much space on the word cloud because of the big F. And that's also why I um, use my name for the name form as Hans S with a big S on the end. Yeah. And while sitting there with my colleagues, said to them, well, this is kind of fun. I want to be on the word cloud next year. So that is also where I started yeah, answering questions on the Nine forum
Hmm.
yeah, to
But
create answers for all the people to be on the word cloud.
which you have done exceptionally well, I would say, because you've answered provided lots of different solutions on the forum, and you did end up making it next year, right? On the next word cloud that we did. Maybe it's 2 years later, but
Now it was in November in the summit in Austin,
yes.
and there was also a presenting of word cloud, and there you could already see my name. But that was the last time the word cloud was presented. So in 2020 there was the pandemic, so there was no summit on site.
So I mentioned that story, and by the way, that Scott F guy sounds like a real jerk. Um, I mentioned that story because it's a different motivator for everybody, right? Like you saw people participating in the forum, and you thought, number one, I can do that, and number two, like I can really do that. I can be the best at that. And you thought,
Yeah,
I'm going to jump in and do it. Other folks
because
may be motivated different ways, but yeah.
yeah, because it works two ways for me. Because when uh, with helping other peoples on the forum, I also help myself because I developed a lot of knowledge about answering questions I don't know the answer in advance. So I also had to dig in the problem and to find the solution. And that's also how my knowledge about Nime, yeah, grows.
Yeah, I that's a really good point. I actually had a similar experience myself when I started. at Knime, about 6 years ago, one of the things that I did early on was jump on the forum to see how I could help. And I found, especially early, as someone who was still learning about different data science techniques, was that I was learning just as much as the people that I was purportedly helping. you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
so I would encourage anybody out there who's listening to us. The best thing to do if to learn data science from scratch, right? The name of this webinar is to try, right? Try it out.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then
Just
if
do
you
it.
find yourself in a position where you can work alongside other people on the same problem and help them out, you may find that you benefit just as much or more than they do.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you and I kind of had similar experiences there. Well,
Yeah. And
let me
even if
ask
you
you.
can't find it, if you can't find the solution by yourself, you always can learn from the solution that other people provide.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great way to gain knowledge, participating in the forum and try to yeah, find solutions for the people.
So let me ask you this then. We've talked a little bit about the form, but when it comes to a new technique, you may see something new out there and you think I want to try that. What is your approach?
Uh,
How do you set that in front of yourself and say, okay, I'm gonna learn whatever it is, neural networks or whatever.
yeah, I would say just do it. Starting just drag and drop some notes on the canvas and see um, what's happening when you connect the data source. Go to the configuration, but then again, um, I try to find out what every part of the configuration means. So I go step by step. Um, First of all, trying to get it to work, and if it's working, then see how I can change parameters or the configuration and see what is the effect, and then go back to the theory, to Google about certain subject, say about neural networks, to gain more insights and see if I can reproduce it in my workflow. It's always going a little bit back and forward from being practical to search and find information on a theoretical base.
Yeah, I think one word that you mentioned there is actually a keyword, the reproducing, right? If you can, in the process of learning something, take an approach that somebody else has implemented and get to the point where you can do it your own way, but still get the correct, or similar results. That's an
Yeah,
indicator, right? That, okay, I,
yeah,
I am approaching this
on the
the way I
right
should
track.
be. I've absorbed the right stuff, right? You can
Yeah.
verify that for yourself. So maybe what are the top, I would start to say top two or three things. Simplify. For a person who's just learning data science, think of somebody who's sitting down and having to generate, you know, uh, they've got Excel stuff coming in. They need to combine a few Excel
Mhm.
sheets and make a prediction, but they don't really know much about predicting or maybe classification or anything. What is your top tip for someone moving from that world to really kind of getting started on a data science journey?
Um, uh, you, what I would say, you, just starting is not enough. You also need some theoretical background of what you are doing because you can configure the nine nodes and they go all on green and you have an outcome. But you need to have some knowledge, yeah, to see if this outcome makes sense, if it's correct or not. Um, so I think you have to read a book, find the blog post, go to some learning track, for example, about prediction modeling, uh, to yeah to get it to work because just do it is not enough. You also need a theoretical background to get the right interpretation of your outcome and to know what you're doing, that you do it in a good way, proper way.
Yeah, it's garbage in, garbage out is
Yeah,
real, right? And especially in a tool like Knime, where as you mentioned, it is easy to connect the nodes together. It's easy to execute the workflow, and all the lights turn green, and then you
yeah,
go, "Oh, great, it worked." Um,
yeah,
but if you don't understand the approach, of what the nodes are doing, then it would you could fool yourself, right? We don't want to fool ourselves. We want
Yeah,
to build our knowledge. So
yeah,
combining those two things, as you mentioned, just do it with um, the actual theoretical knowledge is super important.
yeah. And that's also why I would advise to start with a data set you are familiar with. So if you are doing your prediction modeling or your other stuff on the data set that you know, then it's better for you. Then you're much more better able to um, see if the outcome is correct because you know the data
Yes,
and
yes,
you
having the
know.
domain knowledge. I find that
Yeah.
a lot of people, and maybe you've run into this too, will start with things like, Kaggle exercises where they want to take the
Mhm.
Titanic data set or the wine data set or one of these well-known
Yeah,
ones, and then do a common task on it, make a prediction or a forecast. But those data sets are often artificially clean and
created.
neat and nice and
Yeah,
pretty, which real data
yeah,
never is. So
yeah.
um, as you mentioned, using your own data that is real, but that you also have domain knowledge of, um,
Exactly.
in some ways, I think gives you a better perspective on how to deal with things at the beginning. That's a really
Yes.
good point.
And of course, you can use the wine data set or the Titanic data set to see how it works in general. But I think ultimately you need to connect your own data because there are more, um, yeah, there can be more things in that can go wrong and where you have to deal with during the process.
Yeah, for sure. Well, maybe now is a good time for us to transition and talk about the project or one of the project, one of the many projects that you have worked on using Knime. But this is your personal football data prediction project, and so I know you've got a few slides here, and you were just going to kind of walk us through what you've done,
Yeah.
but then also how you learned to
Mhm.
get to this point to be able to do it in the first place. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Uh, well, when I look back at my projects that I've done, I think there are about 7 lessons I learned or that all those projects have in common. And that's already on the slide. So first of all, it's defining a real world use case. That's also what we discussed. Just get started, just do it, but create or find a data set that you have the domain knowledge of or where you're familiar with. Um, and always take small, manageable steps. Try the simple things first. Um, and when stuck, don't panic. I think that's a good one. And an important one is also reflect on your progress and outcome. As I said, if all the 9 nodes are green, it doesn't mean that the outcome is okay. Um, Stay motivated and curious, keep on learning. So those are my 7 points. And lots of my projects are all connected around the football data. And I think it started some 4 years ago when I tried to make this visualization. And what you here see are all colored lines. And the colored lines are teams in a football competition. And from left to right, you have the round played in the competition. So from the first round to the final round. And here on the y-axis, you have the ranking. And so you can see how the teams are making progress during the season. So where the blue line is here on second place, and then at the end at round 29, I guess, they move to the first place and become champion. So that was my challenge to create a graph like this. And to do so, I used only a small data set that has the outcome of the matches played in one season. So I had about, I think, 612 matches with the score, and that was sufficient to create this graph. So I go from, I created a Knime workflow because I needed to create some other variables like the ranking or the round played. I have this data set. It's also available on my Knime space. When you go to the hub and search for creating your sports data analytics set, and you can find my workflow, and that shows step by step how I go from games to teams to ranking, and the output um, is sufficient to make this graph. And when I was creating this this data set, I was wondering, can I make a prediction for the outcome of the football match? Um, and to make a prediction, you need to go through some steps. First of all, it's kind of a business understanding, and that's all is about getting the question right. Because when I say predicting the outcome of a football match, yeah, what do I mean by the outcome of a football match? Do I mean the actual score? So how many goals were scored? Or do I mean the win, loss, or a draw of the home team? And in my case, I predict if the home team wins, loses, or plays a draw. Um, but that's also that is important, the definition. And also, it's about predicting the outcome of matches in a regular competition. It's not about predicting matches in the Champions League or in the FA Cup in England. So the definition phase is important, maybe not so important for my prediction model because I'm doing it on my own. But if you're doing it in a bigger team and you have stakeholders, it's always good um, to have an agreement on the definitions, etc. You are uh, on the definitions you use for your project. Then the data understanding, that is uh, where you collect all the data, um, where you think that uh, that holds the information um, you think is valuable for the prediction. Um, and in this case, it's important to become a little bit familiar with your data set. And I mentioned it earlier because if I see that the team scores, for example, 25 goals in one match, I think with my knowledge of football, ooh, that can be a little bit too much. So I have to dive deeper into it. The data understanding is doing data exploration to see what your data is about and if it's all if the data set is okay. Then in the data preparation, you make your data set ready for modeling. So what I did here was looking for missing values or outliers and also created a whole bunch of new variables as input for, for my model. For example, the goal difference, the performance um, of uh, the performance of the teams in the previous matches, for example, or the difference in ranking. And then when I have my data set as input for the modeling, um, there I started to model my football prediction model. Started very simple with just a small decision tree to see how my data helps me to predict the outcome. And then I had kind of a baseline of the outcome of my model and then improve from there. So in this phase of modeling, I was always a little bit going back to data preparation, modeling, to see if I can come to my ultimate good model. And then in the evaluation phase, yeah, I explored the outcome of my model, not only by its metrics, but also if it makes sense. Because if my model predicts that 9 out of 10 matches are a draw, then I know also by my knowledge of football that is quite exceptional when that happened. That 9 out of 10 matches are predicted as a draw. So that can be true. So then I'll have to go back to my modeling phase to make some adjustments as well. And then my deployment, in my case, the deployment of my football prediction model is that we have family football pool where I am participating in, and the outcome is of my model is input for the family football pool, and all the also there's a nice thing. My uh, football pool is also running in we I collect the the input via Google Sheets and then distributing the outcome, the predictions, and the scores from every family member by email in an automated process in Knime. So that is my deployment of my football model. So it's not a straight line. Um, so it's always going a little bit back and forward, and that's also why you see the circle diagram here.
Well, maybe you can show us a little bit. Yeah, yeah. Show us a little bit what the workflow looks like
Yeah.
in
So
practice. So the theory versus what it actually looks like in time.
yeah. Well, this is how it looks like my workflow. There are some components, the grayed out nodes, and there are a lot of other nodes in. But basically, it's what it does. It is reading in the data, do some data manipulation, um, and then here preparing for the modeling phase, and then at the end collecting the results and presenting the results. That is all the steps that it takes in my model. And what I think is very nice to Knime is that when you click on a model, you can see on the lower part of your screen the data. So you can directly see what's happening when you make a configuration or modification in your node. You can directly see the effect in your screen below. And because I know when I predict, have to predict 9 matches every round, I see here the row count of 9, so I know okay, this is going well. I can move on. Or here you can see at the end, this is how my predictions are presented. You see here the 9 matches that is has been played in the competition, have to be played in the competition. And because my prediction is running 25 times, it's not always giving the the same result because the data is randomized and shuffled every time. And here you see my prediction.
So you're
And I have some,
essentially. Can I ask? You're running a Monte Carlo approach, right? You're doing 25 different simulations to see what your model
yeah,
predicted would happen, and then
yeah,
essentially, this isn't, I guess, the correct term, but kind of averaging those predictions. And then your data
yeah,
app here looks like you're actually selecting individual teams so that you can look at the box plot and the distribution for each team interactively.
yeah. For each match in interactively, I can see the
Oh, for each match. Okay.
for each match. Yeah, you can see the the probability here on the y-axis. I don't think if you can see it properly, but you can see here the probability of the outcome, the distribution of the probability. So that also can help me to say, well, um, how uh, w- uh, how sure is my model that the outcome will be as predicted. So also, but you've seen maybe in the previous slides that I'm using a Keras neural network, not because it's the um, best algorithm I had before. I had an XG boost algorithm. It was the outcome was almost the same as the Keras, but I wanted to learn something new, so I tried the Keras neural network. But to learn something new, I also had two challenges. That was first I had to get my Keras node to work technically, um, um, and that was not a problem at all because it was all well documented and yeah, it makes no difference if you use a Keras neural network in Python or in Knime because it uses all the both are using the same Python integration. So in the backend of the Knime Keras node, there is a whole Python packages um, that make that yeah, they're all Python packages.
Sure. It looks like on this slide though, what you're showing is there's a book here, I guess, codeless deep learning, and then
Yeah,
like some forum threads. And so is this is the approach you use to learn a new skill, is what I'm seeing.
yeah, and I learned it for my to work with my deep learning and my Keras neural network. I used the book Codeless Deep Learning, and that's quite a good mix between theory and practice. I mean, there's well explained how the algorithms work, and on the other hand, there are practical examples of how you can get it to work by yourself. And even there are workflows available on the Nine Hub to um, to try it yourself. So there was one workflow I used also as a kind of inspiration, as a basic uh, workflow to start learning the Keras neural network and how to implement it. And with the knowledge of that, I could make the transformation to my football prediction model.
That's really cool, actually. That
Yeah,
kind of illustrates a practical example of using the community hub, then of course the forum and other resources to
yeah,
overcome that initial issue a lot of people have, which is staring at that blank screen. What do I do? How do
yeah,
I
exactly. Yeah,
use a
yeah,
different predefined workflow, uses a different data set, right? But then
mm,
understanding how that works, and then you can bring your own data set in and start tweaking it for what it is that you actually need to do. Um,
yeah,
it's so much
exactly.
faster than trying to start from scratch.
Yeah, definitely. And also the practical side of it is important. I mean, you can read books or you watch YouTube, take online courses, but uh, if you only consume it, your skills won't increase. Your skills will only increase if you combine it with doing practical stuff.
Yeah, there's no substitute for just do it, right? At some point,
Exactly.
you
There's
just do
no
it.
substitute for just do it.
Cool.
Great. So yeah, here I'm always when I'm running my workflows reflect on my outcome and the progress I made. You see here a simple cross tabulation uh, between the goals scored by the home team and by the away team, and it gives me an overview about how my data is distributed. And I can say, well, okay, I think with my knowledge of football, this looks okay, for example. And also here on the right side, I have kind of what is called feature importance. That is the contribution of the different variables to the prediction. And when I take a look at it, I'm thinking, okay, does it make sense? Can I explain it by myself? Is there something weird in it? All to, yeah, to see if I can learn from it and if I'm still on track doing the right thing. But one of the main metrics for my prediction model is my overall accuracy, and that's here on 52%. So 52% of the matches with my football prediction model is predicted correctly. And then you can say, okay, 52%. Um, I'm thinking, is that enough to beat the bookies? Can I make money with my model? Um, no, no, I I can't make money with my football prediction model because one of the things uh, that is what is happening that if the probability of the outcome is very high, so if my model predicts a win, a lose, or a draw with a very high probability, then the money you get back from the bookmakers is very little. It's not so much. So I have a lot of green dots over here, but I'm not making any money with it. So really, to make money with my football prediction model, I need to improve uh, on the matches that have a medium probability, and that is where what keeps me motivated and curious. Can I find a way to beat the bookies in the end? So that's the end of my presentation. And my 7 tips how to teach yourself data science from scratch.
Cool. Thank you for that. It's interesting to see a practical application, and also at the end, I mean, just an honest reflection on, can I beat the bookies? Well, not at the moment, but I mean, it turns out what you're trying to do is tackle a really hard problem. I mean, if you could if you
Yeah,
could spend a few hours with the Knime model to beat the bookies, then you probably wouldn't be giving this presentation. You'd be living in a
exactly.
flat in Monaco, and
That's,
you wouldn't be talking to us. It's a tough
yeah,
problem that you're trying to solve. So,
yes,
but it's
it's a
still
tough
cool
one,
to
but
see you take that
yeah,
approach.
but
So,
it's a fun problem. Doing lots of experiments with different parameters and see what's happening, and etc. And like a donkey shot.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Well, so as we wrap up today, we do have a few questions from the audience I want to get to. Before I do that, um, I just want to briefly reiterate to everybody again that's on the webinar with us how to get in touch with us. So you can see our links to our different socials here, our website, um, X, I guess formerly Twitter, Instagram, and so forth. So you can reach out to us there. Our YouTube site, which actually has a lot of instructional Lime videos. But what I want to leave you with today, if you are thinking about learning data science from scratch and you haven't downloaded Knime yet, would encourage you to do it. As I mentioned before, it's free and open source, so it doesn't cost you anything except your time to start exploring, right? Download the analytics platform, jump on the Knime Community Hub, and find a use case that is, something similar that you need to do in your work, or something that you find interesting from a personal aspect, right? And start trying to play with the data, build some models, build some visualizations, see what you can do. And then once you've started doing that, then you can start thinking about some of the things we talked before, like, maybe taking one of our courses, also freely available. I don't think I mentioned they were free, but the online self-paced ones are. Um, and hop on the Nine forum, start asking questions, and just getting involved with the community so that you can increase your skills. But having said all of that, let me take a look at the questions that we have here, Hans. The first one, and I think this actually kind of was asked probably before your slide 7 or 8. It says, "Can you recommend books concerning prediction models for the theoretical background that you mentioned? Where can people get the theory for this stuff?"
Now, I personally don't know books to recommend. I would just say, um, then yeah, just Google it the part of information you are looking for. I don't have no, not really a book, or try to do, if you're really at the beginning, try to do a basic course and see what you learn from that, and where you want to know more information and zoom in on that specific part.
Yeah, I mean, I will say we offer some books via Nime Press that are specific to Nime and data science. They're not all about Nime though, right? They cover more general aspects of, what
Mhm.
does it look like? How does a decision
Yeah,
tree work, and how does a random forest work when you talk about
yeah,
classification, bagging and boosting, and so you get the introduction to those concepts
yeah,
just using Nime in the process. But there,
yeah.
of course,
But
there's
I
a
think,
million books, right?
yeah, and if you just reading books, then most of it can be waste for the specific use case you are working on.
That's fair. Yeah, yeah. There may be a lot of stuff that isn't related to what you want to do. And so
True.
then I would
Yeah,
say, I mean, it goes back again. You've repeated it over and over. It's just do it, right? You sit down and you try, um,
yeah.
and then
And
take
if you
some
run into
courses
a
maybe to
problem, then find
supplement.
information.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
exactly.
There's a question specifically about the model that you built. Does the model also take into account the replacement of a manager, maybe mid-season?
Well, I've thought about that as well, but you need to know that the input of my model is, I think, about 8 years of competitions in, I think, 7 countries. So I have 65 times a lot. So I have uh, a lot of competitions and a lot of countries, and yeah, I need to find all those data for all those switches of managers. But I think it plays a role. It can be effective when it adds to the prediction power. Yeah,
Yep, it seems like a reasonable thing to try and incorporate at some point. That's a good question.
yeah,
Um,
but it costs
Another
a lot of
question
time.
here, just since you've got a lot of experience, you've been doing this for a long time. If you could go back and change one thing in your data science journey, what would it be? Like maybe what's the big mistake that you made that you go back and do differently?
What is the big mistake? Ooh, I think it was a time that I invested to learn more about R, and that I maybe I think also around 2010 or something. Um, and looking backwards, I think that was a waste of time. I could more effort in learning Python.
So just choice of a particular tool along the way. I guess we have to
Yeah,
be a little bit careful to make sure that any tool that we pick or that we invest time in actually, you know, meets the needs of what it is we're trying to do. Yeah, and
yeah,
maybe you can't always know that ahead of time.
mhm, yeah.
Um, Another question similar to that. What would you say? You've seen other people coming up the the learning curve
Mhm.
behind you, learning data science, right? What would you say is the most common stumbling block to people just starting out, and what would you recommend they do to avoid that?
Okay. I think um, um, I think the most important in doing data science is having the domain knowledge, um, knowing what you're doing, that you have experience about the data, that you know how the data, what's the process is that generates the data and how it comes into your database. So you know that you need to know the background of the data, um, and that is, I think, it's not really data science, but I think it's well the key to do good data science. That you need to know more about the subject you are dealing with, and then you have the domain knowledge um, about your data and about the problem that you want to solve.
And
Um,
I
yeah,
would I would
it,
add to that something that I've seen other people do. Maybe I'm thinking back to that diagram that you presented, the CRISP-DM model with
yeah,
the asking the question and the business knowledge and training the model and
mm,
so on. Um, you mentioned when you were discussing that there's a lot of back and forth between the stages there.
yeah,
Um, and I think one of the things that's super important to do is not be afraid to ask if you're asking the right question again through the
yeah,
process, because you may get all the way through the training the model and evaluating the model process and realize, based on the assumptions you've made, there's not a good way to answer this question. Maybe I need to be asking a different question altogether. And of course, that's a little
yeah.
frustrating because it puts you back at square one again. But sometimes that's the only way to move forward.
Mm,
Um, so I would throw
exactly.
that out there. That's not the Hans answer. That's the Scott answer. Maybe it's not as good as
Yeah,
Hans.
no, but I agree. I agree with that because most of the time when you do a data science, you're not working on alone. I mean, there you have dealing with colleagues, stakeholders, and some other people, and you need to keep them updated of what you are doing. And so leveling, am I on the right track? Is this what you expected from the outcome, etc. And yeah, you need to have them on board.
Yep. There has been another question come in. Thanks, Sanket. So as I mentioned before, we've got Nimers in the chat who are bringing your questions to us so we can answer them. The question is, Hans, what additional programs or tools did you find conducive to your data science learning journey outside of, for example, Knime and Python?
Um, Well, I think I'm used a lot of Tableau for visualization because that's maybe one of the downsides of Nine, the visualization part. It's improving in 5.2, but to me, to make a great visualization, to tell a story. I usually don't use Knime, but I use Tableau for it.
Sure,
Yeah,
and that actually allows me to point out that, I mean, number one, you mentioned we are improving the reporting
yeah,
capabilities in recent releases a lot, but also we do have nodes that allow you to access Tableau directly. So um,
yeah,
if you decide that the tool for you to do your ETL and data cleaning and transformation is Knime
mm,
and train your models in Knime and so forth, but you already have a Tableau dashboard that you've been using elsewhere, well, then there's no reason to recreate, reinvent the wheel. Just use Knime, use the send to Tableau server node, send that data over, and use that. Right? We're
yeah,
as an open source tool. One of the things I like is that we're agnostic about interacting with other tools, whether that's
yeah,
Python or R, whatever.
yeah,
We just want to give you the tools that you need to do the job. And Hans, as you
yeah,
mentioned, oftentimes you often need different tools to do the job. So
yeah,
if we can
exactly.
provide a platform that allows for ease of use in bringing those different things together, that's what we want to do. So
Yeah,
I don't know who asked that question, but thanks for that question. That's a good one. Cool. Well, I think we've got just a couple minutes left here, but I think now's a good time probably to wrap it up. So I want to say thanks again to Hans for coming
thank
out and
you.
sharing with us your data science learning journey, what you've done, what you've accomplished, walking through your football
Mhm.
prediction workflow with us. I think it's been very illuminating and enlightening. So thanks for joining us. I will reiterate to everybody again. Go download the analytics platform if you haven't already. If you have and you would like to participate, ask some questions, come to forum.nime.com. Um, Hans and I are there on the forum ourselves all the time, along with a lot of other Nime experts to help you with questions that you may have. And then hub.nime.com, where you can find those example workflows and use cases to get you started right out of the gate. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Hope you learned something. I did. And we'll see you next time at another Nime webinar. Thanks, Hans, and cheers, everybody.
Thank you.